Turn that frown upside down because we're about to show you how to use Transwirl. This plugin contains many presets separated into two categories. There are 5 preset types here: bar warp, morph, spiral, water, and waves. We'll show you how you can make the most of all these presets, starting with this one, bar warp, easy ease. The first control we'll go over is edit mode. To activate it, click on this box. Notice the change in the viewer. Let's check out the playback. With edit mode on, we can see changes to our transition as we make adjustments. We'll also be able to see the angle of the animation, the intro width of the second clip, and the overall width of the animation represented by this number and graph. Below that, the distortion RGB values will show us any changes on the red, green, or blue channels. And the icon below will represent the distortion of the colors. Edit mode is the best way to access the on-screen controls, which determine the path of the bar warp. The green handle determines the start of the path, and the red adjusts the end. In this bottom left corner, we can see the rotation of the animation, as well as the number of animation cycles. Below that, we can see the angle of the animation. And on the right, we can see the slide direction. Now, we'll deselect it. Now let's explore the transition controls, starting with angle animation. In this menu, we can select a direction, as well as whether we want the clip to tilt or flip. We'll select flip up. Here it is in action. Next, let's check out rotation. Rotation determines the direction and amount of rotation cycles. We'll choose 4 cycles clockwise. Here's how that looks. Below that, let's look at slide direction. In this menu, we can choose any of the 8 directions for our clips to slide in. Let's choose down. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Let's play that back. Next, let's adjust the dolly amount. Dolly amount determines the depth of the animation. Here's the result. Now, there's a bit of movement on the Z-axis. Now let's take a look at the distortion controls, starting with bar angle. Bar angle determines the angle of the warping bar animation. Here's how it looks set to 90 degrees. Below that, let's move on to intro width. Intro width controls the widest point of the second clip during the animation. And here's the difference. Following that, we have overall width. Overall width controls the width of the entire transition. Let's get a closer look. You'll notice it looks similar to intro width, but the difference is that it affects the entire animation. At the bottom, we can distort the color controls, starting with red. Red channel determines the distortion of the red values during the animation. Green channel adjusts the distortion of the green values. And blue channel controls the distortion of the blue values. Here's how the footage changed. Now that we explored this preset, let's move on to the next one. Morph, easy ease. And we familiarized ourselves with these controls, so we'll skip to the unique ones. Morph Offset utilizes X and Y controls to let us position the animation. We can select this disclosure triangle to expand the X and Y controls. Now let's see what happens if we tweak the X control. Let's see the result. Next, we'll adjust the Y control. Let's compare. Next, let's check out Morph Direction. Morph Direction determines the angle that the morphing animation will travel. Check out the difference. Groovy, right? Below that, let's take a look at Morph Scale. Morph Scale determines the size of the morph animation. And here's how that looks. The larger the morph size, the larger the individual waves are. Next, we'll look at Morph Amount. Morph Amount determines the intensity of the animation. Let's see how that compares. There are so many more morphs in the example on the right. Now let's switch to the next preset, Spiral, Easy Ease. We've seen these controls already, so we'll take a look at the controls we haven't seen. Spiral Invert reverses the direction of the animation. Let's see what that looks like. It's like a mirror reflection. Our next control is Spiral Amount. Spiral Amount determines the intensity of the effect on the animation. Here's the result. Now let's check out the fourth preset, Water Elastic. We've already seen these controls, so we'll skip to the new ones. Water Speed determines the speed of the water waves. Let's see how that looks. So Ripley. Below that, we'll look at Wave Scale. With Wave Scale, we can adjust the size of the water waves. Here's the result. On the right, the waves are so big that we can only see one wave coming through. Now let's check out the final preset, Waves Elastic. And we'll skip the controls we've already seen. Let's take a look at the new ones, starting with Vertical. If checked on, Vertical switches the orientation of the waves from horizontal to vertical. Let's play that back. Let's move on to Wavelength. Wavelength adjusts the size of each wave. Let's see it in action. With max wavelength, we can only see one wave across our footage. And finally, let's take a look at Wave Amplitude. Wave Amplitude controls the size of the wave's widest point. Here's a comparison. Now that's how you make waves. You learned everything you can about this plugin, and now you've got the skills to pay the bills.